You will die for this." The words cut through the great hall like a blade, and Sarah felt her knees buckle. The crimson wine spread across the white silk of the Alpha King's ceremonial tunic like blood, staining the ancient wolf emblems embroidered in silver thread. Her hands, still holding the empty crystal pitcher, trembled so violently she thought she might drop it too. 300 pairs of eyes locked onto her. 300 wolves, alphas and betas and warriors who had survived the border. Wars, all waiting to watch an Omega servant die for her clumsiness. The silence was absolute. Even the flames in the massive hearth seemed to still, as if the fire itself held its breath. Sarah could not look up. She had learned long ago that Omegas without wolves did not meet the eyes of their betters, did not speak unless spoken to, did not exist except to serve. But she had broken the ultimate rule. She had touched the king. She had ruined the sacred garments worn only for the most important. Ceremonies. She had humiliated him before every pack leader in the kingdom. "Forgive me." Her voice came out as barely a whisper, broken and hoarse. "Please, your majesty, I did not mean to. I will accept any punishment." She was already lowering herself to the ground, pressing her forehead to the cold marble floor in the gesture of absolute submission. Around her, she heard the rustle of movement, the scrape of chairs as nobles leaned forward to get a better view of her execution. Someone laughed, a cruel sound quickly stifled. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard it hurt. This was how she would die. After surviving 3 years of back-breaking work, of going to bed hungry more nights than not, of enduring the casual cruelty of those who saw servants as less than human, this was how it would end. Because her hands had shaken, because she had been exhausted from working since before dawn, because she was clumsy and worthless, and exactly what everyone had always told her she was. "Stand up." The voice was not what she expected. Deep, yes, with the commanding resonance of an alpha who had led armies. But there was something else beneath it, something that made her skin prickle with awareness. Sarah did not move. It had to be a trick. No one told a supplicant to stand before pronouncing their death sentence. "I said stand up." Harder now, edged with impatience. Slowly, her body shaking so badly she could barely control her limbs, Sarah pushed herself to her feet. She kept her eyes on the floor, on the wine that had splattered across the marble, on anything except the man standing before her. She could feel him, though. Feel the weight of his presence like a physical thing pressing against her chest. The king was taller than she remembered from the rare glimpses she had caught over the years. Broader through the shoulders. And there was a scar now that ran from his left temple down to his jaw. His hair, black as a raven's wing, was longer than tradition. Dictated, tied back with a leather cord. And his eyes, those strange gold eyes that seemed to glow in the firelight, were fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to sink back to the ground. "What is your name?" Sarah's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her mind had gone completely blank. She could not remember her own name. Could not remember how to form words. Could not do anything except stand there trembling like a leaf in a storm while the most powerful man in the kingdom waited for her answer. "Your name, girl? Or have you forgotten it along with how to properly serve wine?" That drew another ripple of laughter from the assembled nobles. Sarah felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes and hated herself for the weakness. Omegas did not cry. Omegas endured. "Sarah." She finally managed to force the word out. "My name is Sarah, your majesty." The king was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Softer now, thoughtful. "Sarah. Look at me, Sarah." It was not a request. Every instinct screamed at her not to obey. That meeting in Alpha's eyes was a challenge, that she would only make things worse. But disobeying a direct command from the king was impossible. Slowly, so slowly, Sarah raised her eyes, and the world stopped. Later, She would not be able to explain what happened in that moment. It was not attraction, though she could not deny he was beautiful in the way that dangerous things often were. It was not fear, though she was terrified. It was something else entirely. Something that felt like recognition, like coming home after being lost for a very long time, like finding a piece of herself she had not known was missing. The king's expression shifted. His eyes widened slightly, and she saw his hand move to his chest, pressing against his heart as if it pained him. Around them, the hall remained frozen, watching, waiting. But for Sarah, there was only this moment. Only those gold eyes locked on hers. Only the strange sensation, spreading through her body like warmth, like light, like something waking up after a very long sleep. Impossible, the king breathed, and she did not think anyone else heard it. Then louder, his voice carrying across the hall with absolute authority. Kneel beside me, not before me. The command sent shockwaves through the crowd. Sarah heard gasps, heard someone drop their goblet with a crash, heard the beginning of a protest that was quickly silenced. She did not understand. Kneeling beside the king was a position of honor, reserved for his most trusted advisors, for visiting royalty, for those who had earned the right to stand, or kneel, as his equals. Not for servants. Never for servants. And certainly not for an Omega who had just ruined his ceremonial robes. Your Majesty, surely you do not mean... The voice belonged to Lady Morgana, the beautiful daughter of the High Council's leader. She rose from her seat at the king's right hand, her perfect features arranged in an expression of concerned confusion. Sarah had served Morgana many times over the years, and knew that confusion was a lie. The woman was furious. Her green eyes glittered with barely suppressed rage as she looked between the king and Sarah. Surely you do not mean to honor this servant, after what she has done. The king did not even glance at Morgana. His attention remained fixed on Sarah, and there was something in his gaze now that looked almost hungry. I mean exactly what I said. Sarah, come here. Kneel at my right side. His right side. The position currently occupied by Morgana. The insult, intentional or not, was devastating. Sarah saw Morgana's face flush red, saw her hands clench into fists at her sides. Every survival instinct Sarah possessed screamed at her to refuse, to apologize again, to beg for mercy and run from this hall before she found herself caught in a game she could not possibly win. But the king had given her a direct order, and something in her, some part she did not recognize, wanted to obey, wanted to cross that distance and take her place at his side, wanted to understand why this man, this stranger who should mean nothing to her, felt like everything. She took one step forward, then another. Her legs still shook, but she forced them to move, forced herself to walk across the space that separated the servants' area from the high table where the nobles sat in their silk and jewels. She could feel hundreds of eyes tracking her progress, could hear the whispers starting up like a swarm of angry bees. She did not look at any of them. She looked only at the king, at those gold eyes that seemed to see straight through her, and she walked until she stood beside his chair. Morgana had not moved. She stood rigid, her expression now carefully blank, but Sarah could see the violence simmering beneath the surface. For a long moment, the two women faced each other. Sarah in her plain gray servant's dress, worn thin from too many washings, her dark hair escaping from its braid, her hands still red from scrubbing floors. Morgana in emerald silk, that probably cost more than Sarah would earn in a lifetime. Her blonde hair arranged in elaborate curls, woven through with gold thread. Her skin perfumed and perfect. There was no contest. There could be no contest. And yet, move, the king said quietly, and though the word was soft, it carried absolute command. Morgana's control finally cracked. Your Majesty, I do not understand. This girl is nobody. She is a servant, an omega. She does not even have a wolf. You cannot possibly mean to place her in a position of honor. The council will never accept it. Your people will never accept it." The king finally looked at Morgana, and Sarah saw the woman actually take a step back from whatever she saw in his face. "I am the king," he said, and each word fell like a hammer blow. "I do not ask for acceptance. I command obedience. Now move, Morgana, or I will have the guards move you." For a moment, Sarah thought Morgana would refuse, thought she would force the issue and create a scene that could never be taken back. But whatever else she might be, Morgana was not stupid. With a smile that was all sharp edges and poison, she inclined her head in a mockery of a bow and stepped aside. "Of course, Your Majesty. Forgive my concern. I only want what is best for you." The king did not respond. He simply gestured to the spot Morgana had vacated, and Sarah, moving as if in a dream, stepped forward and slowly lowered herself to her knees at his right side. The position placed her slightly behind and to the right of his chair, close enough that if he moved his hand it would brush against her shoulder, close enough that she could smell the scent that clung to him. Pine and smoke and something wild that made her dizzy. Up close, she could see details she had missed before. The scar was not the only mark the war had left on him. There were others. Thin white lines across his hands. A deeper one, barely visible at the collar of his ruined tunic. His hands were large, calloused from weapons training, and there was a ring on his right hand bearing the wolf seal of the royal house. He was, she realized with a start, probably only a few years older than her own 23 years, though he carried himself with the weight of someone who had lived several lifetimes. "Bring me new wine," the king said, not to Sarah but to another servant who had been hovering near the kitchen entrance. The man scurried forward with a fresh pitcher and a new goblet, both of which he placed on the table with shaking hands before fleeing back to safety. The king poured himself a measure of dark red wine, took a sip, then set the goblet down and turned his attention back to the assembled nobles. "I apologize for the interruption. Please, continue with the feast. We have much to celebrate tonight. The war is over. The border packs have been brought to heel. And I have returned home." His voice was light, casual even, as if nothing unusual had just happened. As if he had not just upended every rule of protocol and tradition by placing a servant at his side. Slowly, uncertainly, the nobles resumed their conversations. Servants began moving again, bringing out new courses, refilling goblets. But the tension in the room remained thick enough to choke on, and Sarah could feel every eye in the hall flicking toward her when they thought she would not notice. She knelt in silence, her hands folded in her lap, her head bowed, and tried to make sense of what had happened. Tried to understand why the king had spared her, why he had not just spared her, but honored her. Why, when she had looked into his eyes, she had felt something shift inside her chest, like a door opening, like light flooding into a room that had been dark for so long. She had forgotten what brightness looked like. None of it made sense. And yet, kneeling here beside him, she felt safer than she had in years. Felt, for the first time since she could remember, like maybe she was not completely alone in the world. The king did not speak to her again during the meal. He ate sparingly, engaged in brief conversations with the various pack leaders who approached to pay their respects, and otherwise sat in silence. But twice, Sarah felt his hand brush against her shoulder. The first time might have been an accident. The second was deliberate. His fingers lingered for just a moment, warm through the thin fabric of her dress. And she felt that strange sensation again. That warmth spreading through her body like sunlight, like recognition, like coming home. If you are enjoying this story, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. When the feast finally ended, when the nobles began filtering out of the great hall to retire to their chambers, or continue their celebrations in the gardens. The king stood. Sarah immediately began to rise as well, unsure of what was expected of her, but his hand came down on her shoulder, holding her in place. "Stay," he said quietly. "I would speak with you." Terror, and something else, something that felt dangerously like anticipation, flooded through her in equal measure. The hall emptied quickly. Servants cleared tables with practiced efficiency, and within minutes, Sarah and the king were alone except for the guards stationed at the doors. He moved to stand in front of her, and she found herself looking up at him, at the way the firelight cast shadows across his scarred face, at the intensity in those gold eyes that had not dimmed. "Do you know why I spared you?" His voice was low, meant only for her ears. Sarah shook her head mutely. How could she know? How could she possibly understand the decisions of a king? "Because I felt it," he continued. And now there was something raw in his voice, something almost vulnerable. "The moment you looked at me, I felt it. The bond, the connection that should not be possible. Between a king and a servant, between an alpha and an omega without a wolf. But it is there. I know you feel it too. I saw it in your eyes." Sarah's breath caught. She wanted to deny it, wanted to tell him he was mistaken, that she was nobody, that she could not possibly be what he seemed to think she was. But the words would not come, because he was right. She had felt it, was still feeling it. This pull toward him that made no sense but felt more real than anything else in her life. "I do not have a wolf, Your Majesty," she whispered. I am nothing. There must be some mistake." The king crouched down so they were at eye level, and the movement brought him so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "There is no mistake. I have waited 28 years to find my mate, Sarah. 28 years of watching others find their bonds while I remained alone. I know what this feeling means, and I know that you are far more than you believe yourself to be." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and brushed a strand of dark hair back from her face. His fingers were gentle, at odds with the warrior's calluses and scars. "I do not know why you do not have a wolf. I do not know why you were working as a servant in my own palace while carrying the scent of my mate, but I intend to find out, and until I do, you will stay close to me. You will be under my protection. Do you understand?" Sarah nodded, though she understood. Nothing. This was impossible. Mates were chosen by the moon goddess, bonds formed between wolves that recognized each other on a level deeper than conscious thought. But she had no wolf, had never felt the shift, never experienced the transformation that came to every werewolf when they reached maturity. She was broken, incomplete. And yet this man, this king who could have anyone he wanted, was telling her she was his mate. "There will be resistance," he continued, his hand still cupped against her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw in a gesture that sent shivers down her spine. "The council will question my judgment. The noble families will be outraged. Morgana, in particular, will not accept this easily. She has expected to become queen since we were children. But I do not care about their opinions. I care about keeping you safe until we understand what is happening." "Why?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "Why do you care? You do not know me. I could be anyone. I could be lying or trying to trap you somehow." The king's lips curved into something that might have been a smile if it had reached his eyes. "You are a terrible liar, Sarah. I can hear your heartbeat. I can smell your fear and your confusion. But more than that, I can feel you. Here." He took her hand and pressed it against his chest, over his heart. Beneath her palm, she felt the steady, strong rhythm of his heartbeat. But there was something else too. A warmth that seemed to pulse in time with her own heart, a connection she could not explain but could not deny. "And you can feel me, cannot you? Even without your wolf," Some part of you recognizes what we are to each other. She could. Moon help her, she could. It terrified her. It thrilled her. It made her want to run and stay in equal measure. I do not understand any of this, she admitted, her voice breaking. I do not understand why this is happening or what you want from me or how I am supposed to act. I am just a servant, Your Majesty. I do not know how to be anything else. The king stood, drawing her up with him until she was on her feet, her hand still pressed against his chest. Then you will learn, and you will call me Cassius when we are alone. I am tired of titles and formality. I have had enough of those to last several lifetimes. Cassius. His name felt strange on her tongue, intimate in a way that made her blush. I cannot. It would not be appropriate. Sarah. He said her name like a caress, and it silenced her protests more effectively than any command. Nothing about this situation is appropriate. We are far beyond the bounds of tradition and propriety. So we might as well start by using each other's names, do you not think? Before she could answer, before she could process any of what was happening, the door to the great hall opened, and a man strode in. He was tall, though not quite as tall as Cassius, with dark red hair and the confident bearing of a warrior. His eyes, a startling shade of amber, swept the room and landed on Sarah with unconcealed curiosity. So it is true, he said, and there was amusement in his voice. The king has lost his mind and claimed a servant as his mate. The palace is buzzing with the news. I had to see for myself. Cassius sighed, but did not release Sarah's hand. Sarah, this is Marcus, my beta and the closest thing I have to a friend. Marcus, show some respect. You are frightening her. Marcus bowed mockingly in Sarah's direction. Forgiveness, my lady. I meant no offense. I am merely surprised. We have searched the kingdom for the king's mate for years. Who would have thought she was right here, serving wine in the great hall? That is precisely what I intend to find out, Cassius said, and his tone had turned serious. Sarah, Marcus is going to escort you to new chambers. You will not be returning to the servants' quarters. You will stay in the guest wing, in rooms appropriate for someone of your new status. New status. The word sent a jolt of panic through her. What new status? Your Majesty? I mean, Cassius? I have not agreed to anything. I do not even know what you are asking of me. He turned back to her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. I am asking you to give me time. Time to understand this bond. Time to prove to you that what we feel is real. And time to figure out why you were hidden away, serving in my palace when you should have been. He trailed off, shaking his head. We will talk more tomorrow. Tonight, you need rest. You look exhausted. She was exhausted. Bone-deep, soul-crushing exhaustion that came from years of barely surviving. But she was also more awake than she had ever been in her life, every nerve ending on fire, every sense heightened. Still, she knew better than to argue with a king. With a small nod, she allowed Marcus to lead her toward the door. She had taken perhaps 5 steps when Cassius called out, Sarah. She turned back to look at him. He stood alone in the great hall, firelight painting him in shades of gold and shadow, looking every inch the powerful alpha king he was. But there was something in his expression that made him seem almost vulnerable, almost human. Sleep well, he said quietly. And know that as of this moment, you are under my personal protection. No one will harm you. I swear it, on my life. The vow hung in the air between them, solemn and binding. Sarah did not know what to say, so she simply nodded. Again, and let Marcus guide her from the hall. The walk through the palace felt surreal. Sarah had worked here for 3 years, but always in the background, in the kitchens and servants' corridors, never in the grand hallways where nobles walked. Now she was being led through those same hallways by the king's beta. and every person they passed stopped to stare. She could hear the whispers starting already, could feel the weight of their judgment and curiosity. Marcus, to his credit, seemed unbothered by the attention. He kept up a steady stream of light conversation, pointing out various rooms and portraits, though Sarah barely processed any of it. Her mind was still back in the great hall, still feeling the warmth of Cassius's hand against hers, still trying to make sense of the impossible. They finally stopped in front of a heavy wooden door, carved with intricate wolf designs. Marcus pushed it open to reveal a suite of rooms that made Sarah's breath catch. The main chamber was larger than the entire servants' dormitory where she had slept for the past 3 years. A massive bed dominated one wall, its frame carved from dark wood and draped with deep blue silk. There was a fireplace, already lit and crackling cheerfully. Thick carpets covered the stone floor. Windows looked out over the palace gardens, though it was too dark now to see much beyond the glass. It was beautiful. It was overwhelming. It was not for someone like her. "I cannot stay here," she said, taking a step back into the hallway. These rooms are for nobility, for important guests. I am just—" "You are the king's mate," Marcus interrupted gently. "Or at least that is what he believes. And that makes you the most important person in this palace, whether you have a wolf or not." Sarah shook her head helplessly. "But I do not understand why he believes that. I do not understand any of this. Mates are supposed to recognize each other instantly. They are supposed to feel the pull of the bond from the moment they meet. But I have been in this palace for 3 years. I have seen the king before, from a distance. Why did this not happen until tonight?" Marcus leaned against the doorframe, his expression thoughtful. "That is a good question. One I am certain the king will want answered as well. But perhaps the question you should be asking is not why it happened tonight, but what changed tonight, what was different." Sarah thought back to the moment in the great hall. She had been terrified, expecting to die. And then Cassius had told her to stand, had looked into her eyes, and everything had shifted. Had the fear somehow triggered something? Or had it been the direct eye contact, the moment of true connection after years of carefully avoiding the gaze of anyone above her station? "I do not know," she admitted. "I was afraid. I thought I was going to be executed. And then he looked at me, and I looked at him, and it was like something woke up inside me. But I still do not have a wolf. I still cannot shift. So how can I be anyone's mate, let alone a king's?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying her with those strange amber eyes. "You know, there are old stories, legends from before the great packs were formed, about wolves whose power was so great it could not manifest until they were ready, about alphas and omegas born without their wolves, who only shifted when they found their true purpose. I always thought they were just stories. But now," he gestured to her, "now I am not so sure." The word sent a chill down Sarah's spine. She wanted to dismiss them, to cling to the certainty that she was nothing special, just a broken omega who had somehow gotten caught up in something she did not understand. But the warmth still pulsing in her chest, the connection she could still feel to Cassius, even though he was no longer in sight, suggested otherwise. "Get some rest," Marcus said, pushing himself away from the doorframe. "There will be guards outside your door at all times. Not to keep you prisoner," he added quickly, seeing her expression, "but to keep you safe. The king was not exaggerating when he said there would be resistance to this. Morgana alone is dangerous enough, but there are others who will see you as a threat. Until we understand what is happening, we need to be cautious." He left before she could ask what he meant by that. Left her standing in the doorway of rooms that smelled of beeswax and lavender. Rooms that were so far beyond anything she had ever imagined for herself that she could not quite believe they were real. Slowly she stepped inside and closed the door. The lock clicked into place with a sound that felt final. There was a bathing room attached to the suite, with a copper tub already filled with steaming water. Someone had laid out a nightgown on the bed, soft white linen embroidered with tiny silver wolves. There were even slippers, lined with fur, waiting beside the fireplace. Sarah stood in, the center of all this luxury, and felt tears begin to slide down her cheeks. She did not know if they were tears of fear or relief or exhaustion. Perhaps all three. She bathed quickly, unused to having so much hot water, to soap that smelled of roses instead of lye. She scrubbed herself until her skin was pink, trying to wash away 3 years of grime and exhaustion, and the feeling that she did not belong here. But some things could not be washed away. When she finally climbed into the bed, the mattress so soft it felt like sinking into clouds. She expected to lie awake all night, expected her mind to race with questions and fears and the impossible reality of what had happened. Instead, she fell asleep almost instantly, pulled under by exhaustion so complete it felt like drowning. And she dreamed. She dreamed of running through a forest under a full moon, her body moving with a power and grace she had never known. She dreamed of silver fur and sharp teeth, and the feeling of wind rushing past her. She dreamed of a voice, ancient and vast, speaking words she could not quite understand but felt in her bones. And she dreamed of gold eyes watching her from the shadows, of a presence that felt like safety and danger and everything in between. She woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and someone knocking on her door. For a moment, she could not remember where she was, could not reconcile the soft bed and fine linens with the hard cot in the servants' dormitory she had called home for years. Then it all came rushing back. The spilled wine, the king's command, the impossible bond. The voice called out again, female and impatient. "Miss Sarah? Are you awake? The king has sent me to attend to you." Sarah climbed out of bed, still wearing the borrowed nightgown, and opened the door. A young woman stood in the hallway, perhaps a few years older than Sarah, with copper-colored hair and sharp green eyes. She was dressed in the clothes of a lady's maid, fine but practical, and she carried an armload of what looked like dresses. "Finally," the woman said, pushing past Sarah into the room without waiting for an invitation. "I am Lyra. I have been assigned as your personal maid. The king wants you presentable for breakfast. We have an hour, which is not nearly enough time given what I have to work with, but I will do my best. What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below." Sarah bristled at the implied insult, but said, "Nothing." She had spent 3 years learning to swallow her pride, to accept the casual cruelty of those who considered themselves her betters. Lyra bustled around the room, laying out dresses on the bed, muttering to herself about hair and cosmetics, and the impossibility of making silk from rough wool. "These are from the king's own funds," she said, gesturing to the dresses. "He had them brought from the treasury this morning. They belong to his mother, the late queen. He says they should fit you with minor alterations." The late queen. Sarah stared at the dresses, beautiful things in shades of deep blue and silver and forest green, and felt her stomach twist. "I cannot wear the queen's dresses. That is not appropriate." Lyra paused in her organizing and looked at Sarah with something that might have been pity. "Girl, if you are truly the king's mate, you are going to be the next queen. You had better get used to wearing appropriate clothes. The next queen." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. In all the chaos and confusion of the previous night, she had not allowed herself to think that far ahead, had not considered what claiming her as his mate would actually mean for Cassius, for the kingdom, for her. "I cannot be queen," she said, hearing the panic rising in her voice. "I do not know how to be queen. I do not know anything about ruling or politics, or any of the things queens are supposed to know. I cannot even read very well. How am I supposed to—" "One step at a time," Lyra interrupted, her voice surprisingly gentle. Right now, you just need to get dressed and get through breakfast. Worry about the rest later." But Sarah could not stop worrying, could not stop her mind from racing through all the ways this could go wrong. As Lyra helped her into one of the dresses, a beautiful gown of midnight blue silk that fit perfectly despite being decades old, as she sat still while Lyra worked her hair into an elaborate braid woven through with silver ribbons, Sarah felt like she was putting on a costume, playing dress up in someone else's life. When Lyra finally stepped back to examine her work, she nodded with satisfaction. "You will do. The king is waiting for you in his private dining room. I will show you the way." The walk through the palace was even more uncomfortable in daylight. More people were about, nobles and servants alike, and every single one of them stopped to stare as Sarah passed. She heard whispers everywhere, felt the weight of their gazes like physical touches. Some looked curious, some looked angry, some looked calculating, as if already trying to figure out how to use this situation to their advantage. Lyra led her through a maze of corridors until they reached a door guarded by 2 warriors. They nodded to Lyra and pulled open the door, revealing a small, intimate dining room. Cassius stood by the window, looking out over the gardens, but he turned when they entered. The sight of him in daylight, without the drama and chaos of the previous night, made Sarah's breath catch. He wore simple clothes, a dark shirt and leather pants, no crown or ceremonial robes. But there was no mistaking what he was. The power radiated from him like heat from a fire, and those gold eyes tracked her movement across the room with an intensity that made her skin flush. "Thank you, Lyra," he said, his gaze never leaving Sarah. "That will be all." Lyra curtsied and fled, closing the door behind her. And then they were alone. Sarah stood frozen near the door, unsure what to do, what to say. How did one behave around a king who claimed you as his mate? Was there protocol for this? Were there rules? "You look beautiful," Cassius said quietly, crossing the room to stand before her. "That dress was my mother's favorite. She would be happy to see it worn again." Sarah found her voice, though it came out smaller than she would have liked. "I should not be wearing it. I should not be here. This is all wrong." Cassius reached out and took her hand, the same gesture he had made the night before, and that warmth flooded through her again. "Nothing about you is wrong, Sarah. We may not understand what is happening yet, but I know that much with absolute certainty." He led her to the table, which was set for 2 with more food than Sarah had seen in months. Fresh bread, fruit, cheese, meat, pastries dripping with honey. Her stomach growled loudly, and she felt her cheeks heat with embarrassment. Cassius smiled, the expression transforming his scarred face into something almost boyish. "When did you last eat a proper meal?" The question was gentle, but there was steel beneath it. Sarah thought back. She had grabbed some bread yesterday morning before her shift started. Before that, she honestly could not remember. "I do not know," she admitted. "Servants eat what is left after everyone else has been fed. Sometimes there is nothing left." The look that crossed Cassius's face was frightening in its intensity. "You were starving. In my palace, under my roof, while nobles stuffed themselves and threw away more food than you ate in a week." "That is just how things are," Sarah said quickly, alarmed by his reaction. "Servants always eat last. It is not personal. It is unacceptable," Cassius interrupted. And now the alpha command was back in his voice. "Eat, Sarah. Eat as much as you want. And from now on you will never go hungry again. I swear it." He filled a plate for her, piling it high with food, and watched as she ate. At first, Sarah was self-conscious, trying to use proper manners, trying to eat delicately the way she imagined nobles did. But the food was too good and she was too hungry. She gave up on pretense and just ate, tearing into bread and fruit and meat, with an abandon that would have mortified her if she had not been so desperate. Cassius ate as well, but sparingly, his attention mostly focused on her. When she finally slowed down, her stomach fuller than it had been in memory. She found him watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "Better?" he asked. She nodded, too embarrassed to speak. "Good. Now we can talk." He leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled beneath his chin, and studied her in silence for a long moment. "I need to understand what happened to you, Sarah. I need to know why a young woman who carries my mate's scent was working as a servant in my palace. Why you have no wolf. Why no one recognized what you were. So I am going to ask you questions, and I need you to answer them honestly. Can you do that?" Sarah swallowed hard and nodded. "Tell me about your family. Where are you from? How did you come to be here?" The questions she had been dreading. The questions that would reveal just how little she had to offer him. "I do not know where I am from," she said quietly, staring at her hands. "I have no memories of my early childhood. My first clear memory is being about 7 years old, living on the streets of the capital. I do not know who my parents were. I do not know if they are alive or dead. I do not even know if Sarah is my real name or just something someone called me once." Cassius was very still. "You were a street child, alone at 7 years old." It was not a question, but she answered anyway. "Yes, I survived by stealing food, by running errands for people who would pay me in scraps. When I was old enough, about 15, I managed to get hired on as a kitchen maid here at the palace. I have been here ever since. 8 years. You have been in my palace for 8 years and no one noticed you. No one questioned where you came from or why you had no wolf." There was fury in his voice now, carefully controlled but unmistakable. "The matron who hired me did not care," Sarah said. "She needed workers. I needed food and shelter. That was all that mattered. And there are others like me, Omegas who never shifted. We are called the broken. We are given the worst jobs, the hardest work, because no pack will have us. But at least here we were fed and had a roof over our heads. The broken." Cassius's hands clenched into fists on the table. "I have been gone for 5 years, fighting wars at the borders, and I come home to find that my palace has been running on the backs of people called the broken. That servants in my own household have been starving, that my mate was living in squalor while I slept in luxury." "You did not know," Sarah said quickly. "You were doing your duty, protecting the kingdom. You cannot blame yourself for—" "I absolutely can blame myself," he interrupted. "I am the king. It is my responsibility to know what happens in my kingdom, in my palace. And I have failed. But that ends now." He stood abruptly and began pacing the room, his movements restless, predatory. "We need to find out who you really are. There is no such thing as a random Omega without a wolf. Wolves are born, not made. If you were born without one, there is a reason. And if you had one and lost it, there is a reason for that too." "How do we find out?" Sarah asked. "I have no memories, no family, nothing that could tell us where I came from." Cassius stopped his pacing and turned to face her. "We start with the bond. The fact that I can feel you as my mate means something. It means you are not truly without a wolf. You cannot be. So we need to figure out how to wake her up." "Wake her up?" The word sent a shiver down Sarah's spine, half fear and half something else. "You think my wolf is asleep? Not gone? I think your wolf has been suppressed. Possibly by trauma, possibly by something else. But she is there, Sarah. I can feel her, even if you cannot. And we are going to find a way to bring her forward." He moved back to stand before her, crouching down so they were at eye level. "I am going to ask you to do something that might be difficult. I want to try to strengthen the bond between us, to see if that can help trigger your wolf." "How?" Sarah's voice came out barely above a whisper. Cassius reached up and cupped her face gently in his hands. by accepting the mate bond consciously, by allowing the connection to form fully instead of fighting it. It will require you to trust me, Sarah. To let me in. Can you do that? Every logical part of her brain screamed that this was too fast, too much, too dangerous. She barely knew this man. Yes, he had been kind to her. Yes, she felt the pull toward him that she could not explain. But to consciously accept a mate bond, to tie herself to him in a way that could not be undone, was terrifying. And yet, looking into those gold eyes, feeling the warmth of his hands against her skin, sensing the sincerity of his intentions, even without understanding how she knew, Sarah found herself nodding. "I trust you," she said, and realized with shock that it was true. "Tell me what to do." Relief flashed across Cassius's face, so profound it made him look younger. "Eyes, close your... Focus on the feeling you get when you are near me. That warmth, that sense of recognition. Do not fight it. Do not question it. Just feel it and let it grow." Sarah closed her eyes. At first, all she could feel was her own fear, her own doubt. But then, slowly, she became aware of the connection. It was there, faint but real, a thread of golden light linking her heart to his. She could feel his emotions through it, his concern for her, his determination to protect her. And beneath it all, a deep well of loneliness that mirrored her own. He had been alone, she realized. Despite his power and his position, despite being surrounded by pack and warriors and advisors, he had been fundamentally alone, waiting for someone who understood, for someone who saw him not as a king, but as a man, for someone who was his equal in the ways that mattered. Sarah opened herself to the bond, stopped fighting the pull, and felt it surge between them like a dam breaking. The warmth became heat, became fire, racing through her veins and settling in her chest like a second heartbeat. She gasped, her eyes flying open, and saw Cassius watching her with an intensity that stole her breath. "That is it," he murmured. "That is the bond. Do you feel it now?" She did. Moon help her, she did. It was like seeing in color for the first time after a lifetime of gray, like hearing music after years of silence, like coming alive after merely existing. And with it came something else, a stirring deep inside. Her. A presence that had always been there, but sleeping so deeply she had never known it existed. Her wolf. Sarah felt her move, felt the ancient consciousness wake and stretch like someone rising from a long slumber. She was there. She had always been there. Just waiting. Waiting for this moment. Waiting for him. "Cassius." Sarah breathed, and the word came out rough, almost a growl. "I can feel her. My wolf. She is..." Pain lanced through her skull, so sudden and sharp she cried out. Cassius caught her as she swayed, his arms coming around her to hold her steady. "What is wrong? Sarah, talk to me." "My head," she managed through gritted teeth. "Something it hurts. Images flashed through her mind. Not memories, not exactly, but fragments of something. A woman with dark hair like Sarah's own, singing a lullaby. A grand room with windows overlooking mountains. The scent of roses and blood. A man's voice, desperate and afraid. Hide her. They cannot know. If they find out what, they will kill her. And then pain, searing and absolute, and darkness. Sarah came back to herself to find she was on the floor, Cassius kneeling beside her, his face tight with worry. "Breathe," he commanded. "Just breathe, Sarah. You are safe. I have got you." She dragged air into her lungs and tried to make sense of what she had seen. "There was someone," she said shakily. "A woman. And a man's voice. He said to hide me. He said they would kill me if they found out what I was." "Cassius." "What does that mean? What am I?" Cassius's expression had gone cold, dangerous. "It means someone hurt you. Someone took your memories and suppressed your wolf to hide you. And when I find out who, they will wish they had never been born." He helped her to her feet and over to a couch by the fireplace. "Sit. I am going to summon the palace healer and the keeper of records. If someone went to that much trouble to hide you, there will be a trail. We just need to know where to look. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on." The healer arrived first, an elderly woman named Thera with silver hair and keen gray eyes. She examined Sarah thoroughly, asking questions about her symptoms, her lack of a wolf, the fragments of memory that had surfaced. When she finished, she sat back and looked at Cassius with an expression of deep concern. "Your Majesty, what you are describing sounds like a suppression binding, a very old, very powerful form of magic that can lock away a wolf and seal memories. It is forbidden magic, outlawed for centuries. The only reason to use such a binding would be to hide someone's true identity." "Can it be broken?" Cassius demanded. Thera hesitated. "Possibly, but it would be dangerous. The binding has been in place for many years, likely since she was a child. Breaking it suddenly could cause significant trauma. It would need to be done carefully, with preparation." "Then we prepare," Cassius said flatly. "I want her free of this binding. I want her whole." Thera nodded slowly. "I will need time to research the proper techniques, and I will need something that belonged to whoever cast the original binding. A blood connection would be best." "We will find it," Cassius promised. He turned to Sarah, who had been sitting in stunned silence through this entire exchange. "You were right to be afraid. Someone did something terrible to you. But I swear to you, we will fix it. We will find out who you really are, and we will make sure no one can hurt you ever again." Before Sarah could respond, the door burst open, and Marcus rushed in, his face grim. "Cassius, we have a problem. The High Council has called an emergency session. They are demanding an audience with you immediately. Morgana's father is leading the charge." Cassius's jaw tightened. "Let me guess. They want to discuss my choice of mate. Among other things, they are calling it a disgrace, a mockery of tradition. Some are even suggesting you have been enchanted or poisoned into making irrational decisions." Marcus glanced at Sarah apologetically. "They want her removed from the palace, preferably tonight." "That is not going to happen," Cassius said, and the alpha command in his voice made even Marcus take a step back. "Sarah is my mate. She stays here under my protection. The council can accept that, or they can find themselves replaced. Cassius, they have the support of most of the noble houses. If you push too hard, you risk civil unrest." "Then let there be unrest," Cassius snarled. "I have spent 5 years fighting to protect this kingdom. I have bled for these people, and now they presume to tell me who I can and cannot claim as my mate? I think not." Sarah found her voice, though it shook. "Maybe you should listen to them. Maybe this is too much, too fast. I do not want to be the reason for conflict in your kingdom." Cassius turned to her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "You are not the reason. Their prejudice is the reason. Their outdated traditions and rigid hierarchies are the reason. I am the king, and I have the right to choose my mate. You are not negotiable, Sarah. Not now. Not ever." The declaration should have made her feel trapped, should have made her want to run. But instead, it filled her with a warmth that had nothing to do with the mate bond. For the first time in her life, someone was fighting for her. Someone was choosing her. Not because she was useful or convenient, but because she was wanted, because she was valued, because she was enough exactly as she was. "Then I will stand with you," she said quietly. "Whatever comes, I will face it at your side." Cassius crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. The embrace was fierce, protective, and Sarah felt that bond between them pulse with approval. Together, he murmured into her hair. "We will face it together." But even as he held her, even as she allowed herself to sink into the safety of his arms, Sarah could not shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. That whatever had been done to her, whatever secrets lay locked in her missing memories, was about to come crashing into their lives with devastating force. And she was not sure either of them was ready for what they would find. The High Council meeting was held in the throne room, a massive chamber designed to intimidate. Sarah stood at Cassius's side, dressed in another of the late queen's gowns, this one a deep silver that seemed to shimmer in the light. Cassius had insisted she accompany him, had refused to face the council without her. So here she was, standing before what looked like every important noble in the kingdom, feeling their hatred and judgment like physical blows. The High Council consisted of 12 members, representatives from the most powerful pacts and territories. At their head sat Lord Aldrich, Morgana's father, a man with iron-gray hair and cold blue eyes that swept over Sarah with undisguised contempt. "Your Majesty," Aldrich began, his voice dripping with false respect. "We have called this session to discuss the matter of your recent, shall we say, announcement regarding your choice of mate." Cassius sat on his throne, every inch the king, his expression carved from stone. "There is nothing to discuss. I have found my mate. The matter is settled." "Settled?" Another council member, a woman named Lady Bria, leaned forward. "Your Majesty, with respect, the girl is nobody. She has no family, no pack, no wolf. She cannot possibly be your true mate. Surely you have been deceived somehow." "I have been deceived by no one," Cassius said coldly. "The mate bond is not something that can be faked or manufactured. What I feel for Sarah is real, given by the moon goddess herself. To deny it would be to deny the will of the goddess." "The goddess does not make mistakes," Aldrich interjected smoothly. "But perhaps there has been some confusion. Lady Morgana has alpha blood, has trained her entire life to be queen, and would make an excellent mate. Perhaps if you gave her a chance, you would feel the same connection you claim to feel with this servant." Sarah felt Cassius tense beside her. "I claim nothing. I state fact, and I am not interested in giving anyone else a chance. I have found my mate. This discussion is over." "It most certainly is not over," Aldrich snapped, his facade of respect cracking. "You cannot expect us to accept a servant as our queen. A woman with no lineage, no training, no wolf. She would be a laughingstock. The kingdom would be weakened by such a choice." "Then perhaps it is time for a new kind of strength," Cassius replied. "One not based solely on bloodlines and traditions that have grown corrupt." The words sent a ripple of shock through the assembled nobles. Several began talking at once, their voices rising in protest. Sarah stood frozen, overwhelmed by the vitriol being directed at her, at Cassius, at the very idea of them. Together. Then Morgana herself rose from her seat near the front. She was stunning as always, dressed in emerald silk that matched her eyes, her golden hair arranged in an elaborate crown of braids. When she spoke, her voice was soft, reasonable, the voice of someone trying to help a friend who had lost their way. "Cassius, please. We grew up together. I have known you since we were children. I understand that you have been at war for years, that you are tired and perhaps not thinking clearly. But you must see how impossible this situation is. Even if you truly believe this girl is your mate, the kingdom will never accept her. There will be rebellion, unrest. You will spend your entire reign fighting to justify a choice that benefits no one." She moved closer to the throne, and Sarah noticed the calculated grace in every movement. This was a woman who knew her power and how to wield it. "But it is not too late. Send her away. Give her enough gold to start a new life somewhere far from here. And then choose a queen who can actually help you rule. Choose someone the people will respect. Choose me." The offer hung in the air, tempting in its practicality. Sarah could see several council members nodding in agreement, could see the trap Morgana had laid. If Cassius refused, he would look stubborn and irrational. If he accepted, he would lose Sarah, but gain political stability. It was a no-win situation. Unless... Sarah took a deep breath and stepped forward. She had been silent. Throughout this entire ordeal, had allowed others to speak for her, about her, without defending herself. But she was done being invisible. Done being dismissed. "You are wrong," she said, and her voice rang clear through the throne room. Every eye turned to her. "You are wrong about what the kingdom needs. You are wrong about what makes someone worthy. And you are wrong about me." Morgana's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Excuse me? I may not have been raised as a noble," Sarah continued, feeling strength flow into her from that bond with Cassius, from that sleeping wolf beginning to wake inside her. "I may not know all your rules and traditions and political games, but I know what it is like to suffer. I know what it is like to go hungry while others feast. I know what it is like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to be called broken simply because I am different. And I think that makes me more qualified to understand the people of this kingdom than any of you." Shocked silence greeted her words. Then Aldrich laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "You think being a servant makes you qualified to be queen? How delusional. I think being a servant makes me understand what most of you have forgotten." Sarah shot back, surprising herself with her boldness. "That a kingdom is not just its nobles and warriors. It is the servants who keep your homes running, the farmers who grow your food, the workers who build your roads, all the people you dismiss and ignore because they were not born with the right bloodline. Those people need a queen who sees them, who values them, who understands that their lives matter just as much as yours." She felt Cassius's pride through the bond, felt his support like a warm hand at her back. It gave her the courage to continue. "So yes, maybe I am not what you expected. Maybe I am not what you wanted. But I am what the goddess chose. And if that makes you uncomfortable, if that challenges your precious traditions, then perhaps those traditions needed to be challenged." The throne room erupted. Half the council members were on their feet shouting. Some looked outraged, some looked thoughtful. Lady Bria was actually smiling, and Morgana looked like she wanted to rip Sarah's throat out with her bare teeth. "Enough," Cassius roared, and the alpha command in his voice silenced everyone instantly. He stood, moving to place himself beside Sarah, his hand finding hers. "Sarah is right. This kingdom has become too focused on bloodlines and tradition at the expense of its people. I have seen it myself during the war. Villages suffering while nobles hoarded resources. Packs fighting amongst themselves instead of working together. A hierarchy that values birth over merit and silences anyone who questions the status quo. That ends now." He looked at each council member in turn, his gaze hard. "Sarah is my mate. She will be my queen. And if you cannot accept that, if you cannot see the value in what she brings, then you are welcome to. Step down from this council. I will not beg for your approval. I will not compromise on this. The choice is yours. Accept it and help me build a better kingdom. Or leave and make room for those who can." The ultimatum hung heavy in the air. For a long moment, no one moved. No one spoke. Then, Lady Bria stood. "I accept," she said clearly. "The goddess's will is not for us to question. If she has chosen an Omega without a wolf as your mate, then there must be a reason. I will support this union." One by one, other council members rose and declared their acceptance. Not all of them. Lord Aldrich remained seated, his face purple with rage. 3 others stayed with him, loyal to the old ways. But 8 of the 12 council members had chosen to support Cassius. It was enough. Barely, but enough. "This is not over." Aldrich hissed as he stood to leave. "You are making a mistake, boy. And when it all falls apart, do not come crying to me." He stormed from the throne room, his loyal followers trailing behind him. Morgana lingered for a moment, her eyes locked on Sarah with such hatred it was almost tangible. "You have no idea what you have started," she said softly. "No idea of the forces you are playing with. But you will learn. Oh, you will learn." Then she too was gone, sweeping from the room in a rustle of silk and fury. The remaining council members approached to offer their formal congratulations, though Sarah could see the reservation in many of their eyes. They would support Cassius's decision, but they were not happy about it. When the throne room finally emptied, Sarah felt her knees give out. Cassius caught her, sweeping her up into his arms as if she weighed nothing. "You were magnificent," he murmured into her hair. "Fierce and brave and perfect. I have never been more proud of anyone in my life." Sarah let her head rest against his chest, exhausted down to her bones. "I do not know where that came from. I was terrified. The best kind of courage is the kind that exists despite fear," Cassius said. He carried her from the throne room, ignoring the stares of passing servants and guards. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere we can be alone without councils and politics and people who want to tear us apart." He took her to his private chambers, rooms Sarah had only ever seen from the doorway while delivering messages. They were surprisingly simple for a king's quarters. A large bed, yes, but worn and comfortable-looking rather than ostentatious. Bookshelves lined one wall. A desk sat by the window, covered in maps and correspondence. It looked lived in. It looked like him. Cassius set her gently on the bed and sat beside her. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the weight of everything that had happened settling over them. "This is real, is it not?" Sarah said softly. "This is actually happening. I am going to be queen." "If you want to be," Cassius replied. "I will not force you, Sarah. If this is too much, if you want to walk away, I will find a way to make it happen. I will not trap you in a life you do not want, mate bond or not." Sarah considered his words, considered the easy out he was offering. She could leave, could take whatever gold he provided and disappear into the anonymity of some distant city, could go back to being invisible and forgotten, safe but alone. Or she could stay, could face down the hatred and fear in politics, could fight for a place at his side, could become someone who mattered, not because of her birth, but because of her choices, could finally be seen. "I want to stay," she said firmly. "I want to be your queen. I want to help you change this kingdom. And I want to find out who I really am, who I was before someone took that from me." Relief and joy flashed across Cassius's face. He cupped her cheek gently, his thumb tracing her jawline. "Then we will face it all together. Every challenge, every danger, every moment of doubt. You and me, Sarah. Always." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away, to refuse. But Sarah did not want to refuse. She wanted this, wanted him, wanted to seal the bond between them with more than just words. Their lips met softly at first, tentatively, like two people learning a new language. Then Cassius's hand slid into her hair, tilting her head back, and the kiss deepened. Sarah felt the bond flare between them, felt her wolf stir and push forward, felt power begin to wake in her veins. This was right. This was meant to be. Whatever else happened, whatever secrets and dangers lay ahead, this moment was truth. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cassius rested his forehead against hers. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. "Something I have not told anyone. About why I spent 5 years at the border instead of returning home." Sarah waited, sensing the importance of what he was about to share. "I knew," he continued, "or I suspected at least, that my mate was here, somewhere in the palace, I would catch glimpses of a scent, traces of something that called to me. But I could never find the source. Every time I tried to track it, it would disappear. I thought I was going mad. Thought perhaps the war had damaged me somehow. So I stayed away. Buried myself in battle and duty because it was easier than facing the possibility that I might never find you. Tears pricked at Sarah's eyes. I was here. I was right here the whole time. Hidden, Cassius said, anger creeping into his voice. Suppressed and bound and hidden away by someone who did not want us to find each other. But we did anyway. Despite everything, we found each other. And now, I am never letting you go. The vow settled over them like a promise, like a blessing, like fate itself acknowledging what they were to each other. Sarah curled into his embrace, feeling safe for the first time in longer than she could remember. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new enemies, new revelations about her past and what had been done to her. But tonight, held in the arms of her mate, Sarah allowed herself to simply be, to rest, to heal, to hope. They fell asleep tangled together, the mate bond humming contentedly between them. And Sarah dreamed again of her wolf, of silver fur and ancient power, of a voice that whispered, "Soon, very soon, you will remember. You will wake. You will become what you were always meant to." And in the shadows of the palace, forces were already moving. Aldrich met with his loyal supporters in a secret chamber, plotting. Morgana stared at her reflection and planned her revenge. And somewhere deep in the archives, a keeper of records found a file that had been sealed for 20 years. A file about a child born with silver eyes. A child of two bloodlines that should never have mixed. A child whose very existence had threatened the balance of power. A child named Seraphine who had disappeared without a trace. The keeper stared at the parchment, at the description that matched Sarah perfectly, and knew that everything was about to change. The lost princess had been found, and the kingdom would never be the same. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who loves epic romance. Tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming?